say, the song says there's 50 ways to leave your lover, and there's more than one way to recover a password. But let's say that you're getting old and senile like me, and you forgot your password, and you need to recover it that way. Or more likely than not, one of your friends, your pals, your buddies gave you their computer to repair, and they forgot to give you their login password, but they still expect you to repair it for them. It would be nice to be able to log in and temporarily modify the password to something that would let you log in and repair a system, and they could always change it back later. So for whatever reasons, this is what we want to do. Method 1. Enter recovery options from the GrubTube boot menu. To utilize this method, 1. Press E at the GrubTube boot menu. 2. Change the line RO quiet splash to RW init equals /bin/bash. 3. Press Ctrl D to boot into Linux. So notice the E option here on my boot menu, E to edit the commands. The first method we'll look at is that option. I'm going to hit E for edit, and these are just some of the commands passed into the Grub bootloader when I'm booting. But specifically what I'm interested in, let me move the cursor back here, is this line where it says RO quiet splash, which is in my config file in the etc grub.d folder on my system. Well, I'm going to erase that, and instead of read only, I'm going to make it read write RW init equals, and I'm just going to say bin bash. Alright, so for the Bourne shell. And now when I've done this, there's several things I could do. I could hit B to boot. I'm going to do Control X to boot up my system under these settings, okay? And when I do, it won't boot up by default and query me or ask me for my login password, but instead, it'll take me to a temporary root shell. And again, who am I? I'm logged in as root. So although normally I'd use sudo, since I'm logged in as root now, I don't need to use the sudo command. At this point, I could just use the password command and change the name if I knew who I was. But let's say that I didn't. Again, I have Alzheimer's and I can't remember who I am. Well, there's still hope for me. If I list the contents of the directory, I could go into the home folder, and any accounts that people use to log into and get an X Windows or GNOME desktop would have a home folder most probably located here. So now I can remember that I'm Charles Germany and I log in as C Germany. And so I could just use the password command on that user account. Or, again, the more likely scenario is that maybe you're working on someone else's computer and you don't know who they log in as, nor do you know their password. Well, this way you can learn the user account they use to log in as, and then you can reset the password to something you know. Alternatively, there's always 10 or 12 ways to do anything, I suppose. But you could cat. Remember that in the etc password file, there's also a list of users, and there I am, and that way I could get a valid user account. So I'm just going to clear the screen, and I'm going to use the password command, and I'm going to change the password for the account C Germany, and I'm just going to make it all password. How easy is that? So it's all lowercase password, and now that I've done that, it's been updated. I just want to sync it if I need to write any unsaved changes, and then I can simply reboot my system now, and I'll be able to log in with my new password. Method 2. Select the Recovery Console option from the GrubTube boot menu if it is available. Method number 2. Use the Recovery Console. By default, a lot of Ubuntu installations will have a recovery mode. They don't all have it, so you might have to use the previous method or the next method. But if you do have access to recovery mode, you can use this method. So if I simply select that menu option, I can boot into recovery mode. Now, more secure Linux systems in Ubuntu, they may encrypt passwords or password protect grub, or they may simply remove the in this case this option from the menu in their grub configuration files. But here I can drop to a root shell, and I can do the same thing now. Who am I? And if I needed to, I could go into the home folder and list the contents thereof, and I could reset the password. So, and this time we'll make it all lowercase pass. You'll never brute force that password. Mwah! I'm just going to change it back because I'll never remember all these password changes. to all lowercase. Ha 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 ha. My password is 1, 2, 3, 4. What a coincidence. That's the same combination on my luggage, if you're a Spaceballs fan. And again, I could sync that information and I could reboot. Method 3. Boot up off of a Linux Ubuntu flash drive, such as Pendrive Linux or the Ubuntu Live CD. And a third option would be we could use our Ubuntu multi-boot flash drive from Pendrive Linux, or we could use our Ubuntu Live CD, or for that matter, if you had another flavor like Fedora. Any Live CD would do, as long as it would let you boot and mount an ext3 or 4 or 2 or Linux file system. So again, I'm going to go try Ubuntu without installing to boot into the Live CD mode off of my flash drive. And here I am on the live CD screen, and I could choose to install Ubuntu, but I don't really need that option. But what I do want to do is mount the partition that my Linux system's on. And again, let me kind of blow this up a little bit. Oops, I went the wrong way. So hopefully it will be easier to see. And just for ease of reference, I'm going to recurse into the root folder. And this is the default boot off of the Live CD, so nothing's mounted yet. When trying this third method, once you've booted up off your Linux flash drive or Live CD, first ascertain which partition Linux is installed to on your hard drive. To do this, use sudo fdisk-l. But what I want to do is look at my file system, so I want to use the fdisk-l command. And again, I notice that here's my Linux installation here. It's on the 5th partition of the first hard drive. In this case, on my Toshiba satellite laptop here. And the partitioning structure, remember that this was Leopard, and this was Windows 7. Second, mount the partition on the hard drive, not the flash drive or the Live CD, that contains the Linux system files. Use sudo mount the partition being mounted to the local mount point. And this is my actual Ubuntu installation down here, but the particular partition that I'm interested in mounting is this one here. This is the actual operating system here, the file system. Okay, so I could mount that anywhere. Let's look at what's mounted currently in the mount folder. Alright, nothing's really mounted there right now, so I'm just going to use the mount folder in my live image to mount it to. So sudo, and I'm going to use the command mount. I'm going to do dev sda5, and I'll mount it to the mount folder. Okay, and now if I go into the mount folder from root, when I list the contents thereof, I'm actually seeing the contents of my hard drive, not the contents in the live image. Third, edit the etc password file in your newly mounted file system. Use sudo nano /etc/password. And particularly what I'm interested in is the password file in my etc folder. So I'm going to go cd etc, etc, etc. And if I look at the password file, this is what I'm interested in here. In this case, this user account. But if I remove any hashed value, or in this case the X between these two colons, then what I can do is pretty much reset that account so that I can log in without having to enter a password. And then I can simply use the password command later when I log in to reset the password to anything I like. And this won't work on some of the other methods we've looked at, would require grub2 and Ubuntu for them to work. But in this particular method, you could use this with Grub Legacy. You could use it on Fedora. You could use it on many different flavors of Linux besides just Ubuntu. And in order to do this, I could use nano. I could use gksudo gedit. If I did alt F2, there's lots of things that I could do. But particularly, I'm just going to do sudo nano, and I'll edit the password file. Okay. Now I'm going to go down here and I'm just going to remove the little X here between these two colons. Alright, so now there's nothing here. And now I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to do Control X to exit. I'm going to say Y yes, and call it password. Fourth, cleanly dismount the hard drive's file system from your local folder. Use sudo umount / the local mount point. Alright, and then I need to get out of the folder so that I can unmount it. Can't unmount a folder when you're inside of it. So I'm going to go back to root, and now I'm just going to unmount sudo umount mnt, and now just want to make sure that drive, that partition is no longer mounted there, so it's cleanly unmounted. Fifth, reboot and log into your newly unlocked Linux installation. Use sudo reboot or sudo shutdown-r now. Now I can reboot, and again, to do that I could just simply issue the command from the shell that I'm in, sudo reboot. And then, okay, and now I'm no longer booting off the live CD, so now I'm booting off my hard drive. And I'm going to log in if that user account whose password or whose account I reset. So I'm going to boot up here, and particular user was C Germany. And I just click on C Germany, and bada bing bada boom, it logs right in. Don't even have to enter a password at all. So now that I'm logged in as C Germany with no password, let me expand this a little bit so you can see. And again, if I were to look at the file, I'll go to the etc folder, and I'll simply cat password file. So notice that unlike other accounts, between these two colons I have no password. So at this point I could not use sudo. I can't authenticate without a password. But since I'm logged in as my